always about. Coffee in hand, the day's first glow. Jumping into the early morning show. Past beats, the headlights scream. Everything's more than it seems. The world is wild, but we're in the know. Cause it's time for the early morning show.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Tac Intel Tuesday. It is not time for the early morning show, but you know what's wild? I made that song using this AI song generator. I just uploaded some lyrics and I said, hey, go sound like the Doobie Brothers, and it spit that thing out. Pretty amazing. All right, everyone, it's Tuesday. It's been a while since I've been on. I was out of town for a couple weeks ago, and I got sick, and then I was out and lost my voice. So at any rate, I'm back. It's going to be back for Tac Intel Tuesday. We'll get these back on track. You know how it is. You get back and then you got to catch up with stuff, and then, other stuff gets pushed aside. At any rate, today we're talking about source motivators. This is a human topic, a human intelligence topic. One of the questions I get asked most frequently, one of the most recurring topics, is people say, Mike, I know I need a tribe. I know I need to get out and I need to meet my neighbors. And I know that the best prepper group is not people who live on the other side of town from me or the other side of the county. I know my goal should be turning my neighborhood into a prepper group or, whatever, mutual assistance group. At just a bunch of dudes that talk to each other. How about that? Let's start there. All right. So if you live in a neighborhood and you have not yet started a dad group, or if you're a mom, you haven't yet started a mom group, then I think you should. I look at my own neighborhood and the guys that live around me, I know a handful of them on a first name basis. I know what they do for a living. I know their fathers, and I'm moderately confident, even though that, for sure they're not like preppers. So at any rate, I think they're attuned. I was talking back about the Israeli strikes. There's a guy that lives in my neighborhood. He works in oil and gas. So he's at the oil field for half the month. He's talking to me. He's like, what am I going to do if I'm working in the oil fields or in the oil patch and something happens? It's just my wife and kids here. I said, look, man, I'm a father. I know how it is, and text me if you need me. And I gave him his cell phone number. He gave me mine, or I gave him my cell phone number. I got his, and maybe we will never text each other. There's a good chance we never will. But if something were to pop off, then at least you have that point of contact. So I would encourage you, everyone, if you're a father, start a dad's group, at least introduce yourself to other dads. Try to find some like-minded areas that you can talk about, even if it's sports ball. If your mom, do the same, mom's group. At any rate, one of the most common questions or topics that I get, people say, I know I need to talk to my neighbors, but I don't know how. I don't know what to say to them. I don't know what to ask them. I don't even know how to approach them. Let's say I do. I go out over to my neighbor's yard and I wave and say hello. How do I even strike up a conversation? And what questions do I ask? How do I lead that person down the path of this conversation so that I get to know this person a little bit and I can determine, hey, I probably will want to link up with this guy if something were to happen, either locally or regionally or nationally, some national level crisis, which I think's nearing 100%, obviously on a long enough timeline. Plenty of reasons to be concerned. With that, go ahead and post your questions and comments into the chat. Today we're talking about source motivators. But in terms of the questions that you should be asking your neighbors, we could talk about lines of questioning and how to formulate direct questions. Talk about elicitation. We could talk about a lot of different tactical human type stuff on how to talk to people. But you know what? Let's take one step back. Let's talk about why people talk at all. Let's start there. before we get to questions, before we get to topics, or how do we talk to our neighbors, let's look at why our neighbors talk to us in the first place, or why sources in human intelligence, why sources will talk to us in the first place. With that, yes. Hello there, fellow neighbor. Are you ready for the coming Civil War? Fantastic. Great icebreaker. All right. With that, let's talk about something tangentially related here. Financial Times has this, it's a pretty decent article. It's up today. It's called Russia Grooms Ukrainian Teens as Spies and Saboteurs. All right, let me pull up the notes here because I read that and, it's like a decent article that's describing, it's a decent article that describes how Russia's FSB, which is the successor to KGB, recruits these Ukrainian teenagers and gets them to go take pictures of sensitive facilities, take pictures of Ukrainian troop locations or troop movements and send in the GPS for missile strikes or for drone strikes, whatever. And this article is kind of going into this internecine conflict in the shadows between Russia's FSB and Ukrainian SBU, which is their domestic internal security service, like their kind of their counterintelligence service. It's very similar. It's very similar to like the FBI's counterintelligence and domestic security mission. So with that, I want to talk about a couple of things. So one of the points that's made in this article is that these kids are not doing this because they're pro-Russian, these Ukrainian teenagers. They're doing this because they're being paid money. It's like, oh, $100. Go take a picture of this and text it to me, and I'll send you $100 on whatever the Russian equivalent of Venmo is, or in crypto, or however they get paid. I don't know. It didn't say. Which is very appealing to a Ukrainian teenager, I'm sure. $100 in that economy for taking a picture, pretty good money. So at any rate, these kids are not doing this for love of Mother Russia. They're doing this because they're being paid. So that's the first thing I want to point out is the motivation for these kids. Why are these kids doing this? Because M means money in MICE RC, which we will talk about. Going on, and it's not just this. Okay, so there's this 16-year-old kid in Ukraine recruited by the Russians online, and he gets arrested by SBU. They start rifling through his phone. He's got pictures of critical infrastructure. He's got GPS coordinates that he's sending back to the Russians, or was at least preparing to. He said he's doing this for quick cash. And apparently some of these kids believe that they're just like playing a game, like it's a scavenger hunt, and then they are rewarded monetarily at the end. They're competing for prizes. At least that's what this article says. Pretty interesting point. Of the 700 Ukrainians that were arrested in roughly a 1-year period from spring 2024 to spring 2025, about 25% of them were below the age of 18. So this is at an age where I can only assume a 16-year-old is a 16-year-old, regardless of where that 16-year-old lives. And making money is one of the things that a 16-year-old probably wants to do for freedom and some level of independence. That's the struggle at that age. SBU also arrested a Ukrainian woman. She was, at least allegedly, she built a bad word, something that goes boom. I'm not going to mention it on YouTube. And she carried out a bad wording in Kharkiv. In a separate case, 2 teen boys allegedly built one of these things, an IED, with the help of Russian agents. Apparently all this stuff's being done online. These Russian agents are teaching these people how to build this stuff online, and then they're building it there in Ukraine to go carry out these attacks. The Russian domestic sabotage campaign inside Ukraine started, quote, with tasks of burning cars and electricity hubs. I guess that's probably like electric substations or something like that, along the railway, and then burning military recruitment centers, and then switched to using Ukrainians as, they say, suicide bombers. A little bit doubtful on that, but we'll see. At any rate, Very interesting article. I want to share with you on the topic of of agent and source motivation. How do they get these people to do this? We'll go through it here. This is a direct quote from this article. The recruitment channels follow a similar pattern. An anonymous user reaches out to youths over Telegram, Discord, WhatsApp, or Viber with attractive offers of quick and easy money. Then, once contact is made, Russian handlers provide coordinates and instructions ranging from photographing military objects or air defense systems to planting bad words or conducting arson attacks on energy infrastructure in recruitment offices. The promised payments range between $100 and $1,000. And then there's this quote here from an SBU officer. If a decade ago there were some Ukrainians sympathetic to Russia's military actions, there are hardly any left. And so this SBU officer says, quote, so FSB, so Russia's intelligence agencies, in this case, it would be SFB doing this. Russia's intelligence agencies have changed their approach to offering people money. Again, the M in MySRC we'll talk about in just a minute. So with that, there are really two types. I mean, we talk about source types. There's all sorts of different source types, but in terms of their awareness of what they're doing, there's two types of sources. There are witting sources and there are unwitting sources. And a witting source is someone who comes in and knows what he or she is doing. This person knows that they are passing information or providing information to the Americans, and they know that. There are witting sources. They are wittingly providing this information. When you go and you read a source description statement on a human, a DIR or an IIR, an intelligence information report from some source, and in the source description, it will say, or sometimes it'll say, the source provided this information wittingly, or maybe alternatively, the source provided this information unwittingly, in which case it's an unwitting source. So this source provided some information without knowing exactly who he was providing it to or what it was going to be used for. The same applies to us in our neighborhood. If you run a preparedness network, which I think everyone of like mind should be a part of a county-wide preparedness network, that's one of the big things I preach. I say, go find the like-minded people in your county and go hop on a Signal chat and talk about things that are happening in your county. You know, everyone's up in arms about this one big, beautiful bill that just passed the Senate a short while ago, which is fine. That's news. It's not unimportant. But I look at the hand-wringing, and yeah, there's some pretty big important stuff in it. But for most news is a complete waste of time. You'll be far better served networking with people who live in your county, or especially who live in your neighborhood. So one of the things I recommend is starting a county or an area preparedness network. And that's something that you can meet on a Saturday morning, one Saturday a month. We've done that for years. And we provide, we talk about things. We have law enforcement officers there who are members of the group, very good friends of ours. And they provide us firsthand information about crime trends. Oh, we're seeing this, or this has started happening in this part of town. Really just indispensable intelligence information being passed during these meetings. And someone says, oh, I work in the banking industry. Oh, I work or whatever. We got all sorts of walks of life in this group. And people share information. We do this throughout the day on our Signal chat, which is more secure than SMS. No one is under any auspices whatsoever that it is secure from other prying eyes. But then again, we're sharing local information. It's not like we're doing anything nuts, obviously. And then you meet once a month. So you can be like us and go have your Saturday morning meeting, or you can just go grab lunch or dinner one night a month. Go get dinner invite a bunch of friends and just say, hey, just in case the world tips sideways, let's have a discussion on what we're going to do about it. Let's have a discussion. Let's talk about our local concerns. Let's talk about how we're going to communicate, how we're going to pass information, how we're going to protect our neighborhoods, what we can do defensively and proactively to make sure that our families are safe. a lot of dudes would be interested in having that conversation. It is incumbent on you to go out and find them at any rate. Point being, in terms of sources who are aware or unaware of what they're doing, we've got witting sources and non-witting sources. Again, witting sources are telling you information because they know who you are and they know what you're going to do with it. And we have unwitting sources who maybe this has come about through hearsay, or maybe they're telling you because you practice elicitation, or they're telling you because you went golfing and they're just telling you all about their job and all about their work and all about their plans. And now I'm just sitting here listening again to someone who's telling me way more than what I need to know, telling me a lot of information I didn't even ask for or lead them to produce, and otherwise just talking a lot. At any rate, these, and I bring this up because you go back to this article about the Russian recruited Ukrainian saboteurs, and some of them are wittingly providing. They have to know. At 16, you're dumb, but you're not that dumb. At 16, you know if some random stranger off the internet contacts you and says, hey, go take a picture of this power substation. Go take a picture of this air defense battery that's out here in this field, and go and take me a picture and send it to me. You have to know. You have to know what you're doing. Apparently, some people don't. With that, let's go ahead and move on to the next topic here, which is source motivation. And again, the reason why I start at motivation and I don't start at questioning is because to get our questions answered, we really have to understand what motivates this person to give us information in the first place. And the better we can understand that source motivation, the better we can formulate our questions to get at the information that we're looking for. So there's really three types of source motivation here. Two are external and one is internal. So the two external types are external reward. People are doing things because they want money, or they want material, or they want something out of it for themselves. You have external punishment, which is negative consequences. If I don't tell this person something, then it's like the mafia. The mob boss or whoever, the local capo, whoever's in there, Susie, beautiful woman. You got 2 kids, beautiful kids. Be ashamed. Be ashamed if you came home one day and they weren't there. That's coercion. Okay, that's motivation. That's motivation for you to tell someone something or for you to do something in return for not having those negative consequences. So that's coercion or credible threat of violence. That's external punishment motivator. And then finally, there's intrinsic motivation, and this is where we want to get people. We want to get people to share with us information or to do things because they believe it is the right thing to do. They're intrinsically motivated. They're not being motivated because they're going to be paid. They're not being motivated for fear of negative consequence. They're doing this because they say, you know what, this is my contribution. This is my part of the effort, and I'm going to provide this information so that I can make things better for myself or for my family, or just because it's the right thing to do. On that topic, let's talk about this very briefly because it's somewhat similar here. I'm reading this pretty good book by John Kenneth Galbraith called The Anatomy of Power, and it is all about power. And in this book, he says, look, there's 3 sources of power, ultimately 3 sources of power. There's personality, there's property, and there's organization. And personality would be leadership. People follow you because you have personal authority, because of your personality, because of your leadership capability. That is one source of power, which means that you dictate to others what you want to have happen, and they do it because they recognize that you or whoever else has power. Second is property, which really means you're just, in most cases, buying someone's submission. But wealthy people have power. Money talks, and you can pay people to do things that you want. That is a form of power, source of power. And then finally, there's organization, which Galbraith says in the modern era is the most powerful form of power. It's the best source of power. And one of the things that I say in terms of low intensity conflict, and really just my philosophy on navigating this upcoming crisis, is that it's not the guy with the most guns who wins the future. It's going to be the guy who can bring the most people to the fight. And when I say bring the most people to the fight, we're not just talking about guns, we're talking about intelligence, we're talking about resources, we're talking about logistics, we're talking about skills, knowledge, abilities, everything. Whoever can, social power, bringing the most people to the fight is a function of social power. And that's one of the reasons why I continually encourage everyone. I encourage y'all, everybody, to build political, social, and economic power for yourselves. Political power means that we are electing the right people as a line of defense or line of offense. It does not solve all of our problems, but electing a good sheriff can solve a good number of our problems. So political power, very important for you to exercise at the local level. We have social power. This is groups of people. I'm going to have a group of people to express their displeasure or to oppose or support certain things. That's how we keep the bad stuff out of our communities, is through social pressure. And then we have economic power, which is typically going to mean profits. We've got money coming in because money is stored power. We can spend money to solve problems. It doesn't solve all the problems, but only money can solve money problems. And my biggest problem with the right in general, and I am self-identified right-winger, is that there is way too much of a focus on guns and ammo and twist rate. And I look at the preparedness, the prepper community. Oh, my bug out bag, my precious. I've got my 70-pound bug out bag that's packed full of crap that I'll probably never need. There are misplaced priorities here. We need to be developing political, social, and economic power, because that is what wins low-intensity conflict. That is how you win the future, using political, social, and economic power to bring the most amount of people to the fight, which is going to be political, it's social, and it's economic. So with that, let's go ahead and move on. I'll share a lot more stuff from this Anatomy of Power book. It's been great so far. All right, let's talk about motivation. There are two frameworks that I teach for motivating sources, or for understanding what motivates someone to share information with me. Maybe it has zero impact on them. Maybe they can share that without fear of reprisal. It's not inappropriate, or it's not illegal, or it's not unethical for them to share this information with me. Or maybe it is. Either way, we're still talking about source motivation. The first is RASCLS. It's from a great book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. You've probably seen this before. RASCLS. We start with reciprocity. In this book, Cialdini talks about reciprocity is a near universal human trait. If we're going into a store and I open the first door for you and I let you walk through, you may not open the second door for me, but you're more likely to. You're more likely to reciprocate. If I'm friendly towards you, you're more likely to be friendly towards me. If I run you off the road and flip you off and scream obscenities out my window, you're far more likely to respond in kind. That is the law of reciprocity. So when we talk about source motivation, the first thing we need to consider is reciprocity. How do people want to be approached? And call this quid pro quo, call this a lot of different things. You know, it's like in my first tour in Afghanistan, was at an interrogation facility, and tea and cookies works, man. Tea and cookies or a Coca-Cola and a cigarette work far better to establish some base level of rapport than did theatrics or coercion or yelling and screaming and pounding on the table, anything like that. The fear and intimidation. Tea and cookies, or you come back from the DFAC with an extra bowl of grapes, okay? That is reciprocity. Next is authority. People want to work with others who have authority, or you want to work with an organization that has authority. We can see this in politics now. We can see this in like local law enforcement, politics at the local level. You want to work with the winning side, or you want to work with someone who has authority or someone who has power. for you in your neighborhood, right? Let's boil this down to the very base tactical level in your neighborhood. How do you establish authority or personal authority for yourself? We have, by my count, over 300 people watching this on YouTube and X, the only two places it's streaming to. And the reason why you're watching is because most of you, or if you've known me for any period of time, you recognize me as an authority on intelligence because I've done it. That's my background. So the question is, how do you establish personal authority at the local level? And a lot of this comes down to what you know, how successful you are in your job, and what you can provide or what you can produce for your neighborhood. I know everyone's short on time, but Meals on Wheels or cutting Grandma Methuselah's house down the street is a really good way to build personal authority. Or just giving back, building authority at the local level. So the question is, what are things that you can do to build authority for yourself at the local level? Because people want to work with authority. The next is scarcity. It doesn't really apply to us, but in terms of, you want to induce scarcity, and it's like fight or flight. I'm giving you this opportunity. You tell me this information and you will get this reward, or I'll move on to the next guy who will, and you will no longer get this reward. So that's a sense of urgency or scarcity there. Next is consistency and commitment. We need to be consistent with our following through with our obligations, doing what we say we're going to do. No one wants to work with the guy that's 15 minutes late and is always asking to leave early from work. Yeah, for a long time, a quasi friend of mine wanted me to take him hog hunting. And I said, yeah, okay, sure. Let's go Friday night. Come over like, 10, 11 p.m. We'll get set up, situated, and we'll go walk down to the creek and we'll see if there's hogs down there. We'll go shoot them. Okay, we walk down there. There's a few hogs, so we shot them. And I go get the Kubota, drive down to the creek. We load up the hogs, and this guy, he doesn't want to get his hands dirty. These are wild hogs. They got dirt and they're grimy and kind of filthy, because they've been wallowing in the mud. And it's just like, pick up the pig, man. You wash your hands later. Just pick it up and throw it in the back of the Kubota. Oh, because he wanted to keep the meat. I said, that's fine. We'll go pull out the back straps. Okay, so we bring a few pigs up. And it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. And my hands are just covered in blood because I'm pulling off the back straps, all these things. There's blood and guts all over the back patio at the house. He's like, man, I'm really tired. I think I'm just going to turn in for the night. And he does. He just leaves. And I'm there, and it takes me an hour to clean up and get the pigs down and wash my hands, spray off the back porch with all the blood and stuff on there. And, and it's like, 4 or 5 o'clock before I get done. At any rate, that's the last time I'm doing jack shit for that guy ever in my entire life because he just quit on me. So he was not committed to what we were doing. And no one wants to work with the person who is not committed to what you're doing. That's why it's incumbent on you to be committed and to be consistent with what you do. Hope that explains that point. Next is likability. We like others who are like us. I went to the University of Alabama. If I walk into a restaurant alone and on the right side, there's Alabama fans, and on the left side, there's Auburn fans, I'm going to go sit with the Alabama fans because they're like me. So from a human perspective, if you live in an area, the county where I live in now in Central Texas is 20, 30% Spanish speaking at home. Okay. At least 20% speak Spanish at home. I don't speak Spanish at home. I'm not Hispanic. I don't have Hispanic passing. Definitely don't speak Spanish at a native proficiency. So if I'm trying to engage in that community, probably not going to be me. I'm probably going to find someone who is like-minded, a buddy of mine who is Hispanic, who does speak Spanish, to go talk to those people and engage that community. Probably will not be me. And that's just one example of likability. And then finally, social proof. They say something like 70% of people who buy items online check reviews first. 70%. That's why Amazon, if you ever buy anything from Amazon, they pester you to provide a review. Because the more reviews they got, the more things they'll sell. It's the same reason why these clubs will line up this velvet rope and have a line that's half a mile long outside their club. It's social proof. If people are waiting to get in this club, it must be pretty good. Doesn't work on me, but it works on a lot of other people. So that is another example of social proof. The question is, what can you do, yourself, to establish social proof within your community? And this is one reason why volunteering and doing nice things and helping people or offering to help people really pays off. That's not the only reason why I offered my neighbor. I said, look, hey, if you're off in the oil field working and something crazy, text me if you need me. If you need me to bring your garbage can up, if you need me to do whatever, mow the grass because you're out of town, that's fine. Text me and I'll offer to do it. Okay, that is one way to build social proof, because if there's ever a situation where someone asks my neighbor, hey, what about this Mike guy? Oh yeah, Mike's great, man. Mike's a good dude. Okay, that's an example of social proof. I'm having someone else say, yeah, Mike's a good dude. Hopefully I really am a good dude. All right, any questions thus far on influence? It's a fantastic book, but this is the RASCLS framework. I consider this kind of like a bedrock level understanding that we're going to build on when we talk about what motivates sources, but RASCLS is indispensable. The next thing is MICE RC. And thanks to Dean, he asked me this morning if I'd cover MICE RC or MICE. MICE is pretty popular. I was taught MICE RC, and we'll talk about, there's also Mises. I've never heard Mises before, but it's apparently what motivates people to join criminal groups or gangs or something like that. Extremist organizations, very similar to MICE. So at any rate, MICE is our source motivation framework. We start with the M in MICE, which is money. That's why these Russians are offering these Ukrainian kids to go take pictures of Ukrainian troop movements and defensive positions, military defense equipment, to go send them. They're being paid. They get quick cash. So I go over here, I take a picture, I text it to you, and then I get money. Cool, let's go. For us, maybe it's not just money, but maybe it's material, a bag of groceries, a case of ammo. There's just a lot of things that we can do to provide material to people to motivate them to do what we want or to give us information that we want. Next is ideology, which is, I think, is the strongest. It's the one that I want to leverage the most, ideology. People are telling me information because we share the same ideology. People are telling me information because they're ideologically motivated to do that, because they know they're going to give me information and it is going to benefit them in the long run. This is why when we have our group meetings and everyone pipes up and talks, passes on what they know, whether it's rumit, scuttlebutt, hearsay, or my brother's a sheriff's deputy and this is what he told me about this crime that happened last week. They share that information because they're ideologically motivated to. Nobody's paying them. We're not twisting their arms. They're doing it because they're intrinsically motivated, because it's the right thing to do. They're in a group of like-minded people. We know that we're all pushing in the same direction, and we have this level of trust and familiarity with each other. And they know, I'm going to share this information and it's going to benefit the group. And that's the right thing to do, and I'm going to do it. We want everyone, as many people as possible, to be, in general, to be intrinsically motivated to share information because that's the right thing to do. Ideology, leveraging ideology, helps us do that. Next is compromise. So this is illegal, but compromise is, they say it's not what you know. It's not who you know. It's what you know about who you know. So there's a lot, you go back and you read about Cold War era espionage. And I was watching this documentary on Kim Philby. And, back in the 50s or 60s in the UK, homosexuality was still like pretty social moray. That's not the right word I'm looking for, but basically it's like not good in that period of time. And so the Soviets would use these they would like ensnare these people in homosexual relationships and then use that, hold that over their heads and say, well, your boss is going to find out. And then your career may end. You may not get that promotion that you wanted, or maybe you'll get kicked out of MI6 or whatever organization they're working for. This is, again, that Kim Philby documentary. I mean, we'll look at Epstein Island, kind of the same thing. Get these high-level politicians and people who have wealth and power and influence, get them, ensnare them in these compromising positions, and now they're motivated to do things or to say things that you want them to do or say. Next is ego. People will do things because they want, because they can. I think we've all either know or we've all met that guy that will just talk endlessly about all his accomplishments in life and everything that he knows for his ego. And there's all this constant game of one-upsmanship, and whatever story you say or whatever piece of information you say, he comes over the top with something better or something juicier or something, whatever. And that is an ego problem. We can leverage ego. We can use someone's ego to motivate them to provide us information. Next is revenge. I forget what it is, but it's like the overwhelming majority of insider leaks are cases of revenge. They're doing this because they're getting back at the company. They're getting back at their boss because they feel like they were wronged. Estranged girlfriends or estranged wives or people that you have bad blood with. I'll just tell you this quick story here from Baghdad. For a long time in Iraq, it's like if anybody said you're AQI, okay, in Iraq, if anybody just pointed fingers, oh yeah, that guy's AQI for sure, yeah, go get him. He went and got. And so there were these two rival fruit vendors, and they would always kind of like race and fight over who had the street corner, because apparently it's like the best street corner to sell your fruit from. Now remember, you're an Iraqi and you live in Baghdad and you're a fruit vendor. Your life kind of sucks, okay? You don't have a lot of good stuff going for you in the broader scheme of things. And one day, one of the fruit vendors, one of these two guys, called up whatever unit that was over there and said, oh yeah, this guy, he's AQI. He's a fruit vendor. He's right here right now. And he gives the location. And sure enough, man, they roll out and they puck this guy. Person's under U.S. control. They go arrest this guy and bring it back. Zero affiliation with AQI whatsoever. But that was a form of revenge. Like, we didn't leverage him. That guy leveraged us to go carry out revenge. And so a lot of people were ideologically committed, people who cooperated with us against AQI or against Jaish al-Mahdi or the Taliban in Afghanistan or whatever these groups are. If they wanted to get revenge, the surest way to do that is provide information on their enemies. And so we can do the same thing, right? They come in and they provide information to us, and we leverage that desire for revenge. We say, yeah, sure. You tell us where this HVT is, we'll make sure that he gets got. And a lot of people will share that kind of information if they also want that guy to get got. So that's revenge. That's another MICE RC factor. And then finally is coercion. I told the story of the mafia. That should have been under coercion, but not compromise. Coercion is the credible threat of violence or the threat of the credible use of force. It's that mafia guy saying, oh, Tommy, Susan and the kids, so, you've got a lovely family. Sure would be a shame if something happened to them if you never saw them again. That's a form of coercion. Also illegal, highly illegal. With that's MICE RC. That's like pretty standard templated boilerplate stuff. I just want to share this last thing with you. I'm just going to give everyone this in a nutshell, pretty much every Tac Intel Tuesday. The way to win the future, again, the future does not belong to the guy with the most guns or the most gear or the most whiz bang, whatever. The future belongs to the guy who can bring the most people to the fight. And the fight happens in a bunch of different domains, but especially at your local level. That happens on the political, the social, and the economic domain. And the way to win the future, the thing that I impress on people and provide training for at special projects, is everything starts with your personal authority. Why should people care who you are at the local level? Why should people follow you? We've got Kevin. And Kevin's kitted up and he's got the guns and the night vision and he's, whatever, all the money put into this stuff, but he's 300 pounds. Is that someone you're going to follow? No, of course not. He's got no personal authority. He just bought his way into all this stuff. And then you got Tom, and Tom doesn't have the best gear, but you know what? Tom wakes up every morning. He goes rucks, and he goes and runs. And he can tell you the difference between clandestine and covert. And he can pick up a radio and find radio communications of other people in the area. And he can hop on a computer, and he's built out an open source intelligence feed for his local area. That guy has way more personal authority because he's put in the work. He's put in the effort. He's built the thing. He's done the things. He's doing the things. So everything starts with your personal authority. Once you develop that personal authority, the reason why people will follow you are your leadership skills. You can start to build your tribe and network. And once we start building our tribe and network, we're accumulating sensors. And sensors mean information. The more sensors we have out there, the more people we are getting to pass us up information, the better intelligence we can produce. And then we get to produce that intelligence and then leverage it to help shape local outcomes. That could mean getting the right guy elected to dog catcher or to sheriff or on the city council or on the education school board. Could mean shutting down a transgender story hour, whatever these things are called at the local library. You put enough social pressure on these groups or the drag queen story hour stuff. I don't want that stuff in my neighborhood. I don't want that stuff in my city. So you can't use social power if you don't have it. We want to build social power so that we can leverage it and get that thing kicked out. Go do that stuff in the city, but you're not going to do it in my county or my town. And then economic power. Money is stored power. We use money as a form of leverage to solve problems. It doesn't solve all problems, but only money can solve money problems. And so that's what I mean when I say shape local outcomes. As we're shaping local outcomes, we're in a position where we are acting in our own best interests and not existing at the will of someone else who has power, doing things in his or his tribe's best interest. We're also gaining personal sovereignty at the local level, especially. We're enabling ourselves to do more things, to be more sovereign, to be less dependent, be more self-sufficient, more resilient. And then finally, we are using that to build power and influence at a larger level, not just in your neighborhood, not just in your city, but at your county level and maybe your regional level. And when we get into periods of low intensity conflict, your ability, low intensity conflict, again, it's an umbrella term that describes conflict beneath the threshold of conventional war. So we're not talking about tanks and bombers, but above routine peaceful competition. At a minimum, we're already seeing this in the United States. It is going to continue. It's almost certainly going to worsen before it gets better. And this is like not just a few months long problem. It's not just through the next election cycle. Probably gonna be living with this at least through the 2030s, at least the early 2030s. I don't see any reason why it would end any sooner than that. Definitely not going to end before our sovereign debt crisis, which I also think we're going to have. And that sovereign debt crisis is going to make things far worse for our low intensity conflict. So when you want to keep that stuff out of your neighborhood and you want to win a low intensity conflict, this is the path right here. These are the things that you got to do in order to keep the good stuff in and keep the bad stuff out. To keep your local political terrain favorable to you, to keep your local social terrain favorable to you, your local economic terrain favorable to you, to make sure that no one is imposing their will on me. And instead, we're imposing our will on others because it benefits us. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing for you. Because no one lives in a power vacuum. If you're not imposing your will in the area, someone's just going to impose their will on you. No one wants to be at the other end of someone else's spear, but the people are not developing political, social, and economic power. These are legitimate forms of power. The people who are not developing that are going to be at the end of someone else's spear. Just you read history, you realize this is exactly what happens when the state loses a monopoly on force, which is what we're getting into in this country. Bad stuff. couple other things here. Last slide here. Choice theory. This is not a book that you're going to find on any intelligence officer's bookshelf or any human collector's bookshelf. Probably not. Choice theory. People say, oh, that pizza changed my life. No, dude, this book changed my life. It's called Choice Theory. It's by Bill Glasser. Peace be upon him. I think he's dead. Fantastic book. He's also got a bunch of other books, like Reality Therapy was also cool. Choice Theory is one of these, it says The New Psychology of Personal Freedom. It's a fantastic book. If you want to be a human collector, you simply must read this book, period. And then also the Air Intelligence Handbook. I ran out of physical copies. We will get some more print copies made, 200 pages. The book I wrote and published back, was it last year? It was actually 2023. It is up on Amazon Kindle in ebook format. It may not change honestly, it probably will end up changing your life if you read and heed it, but it will definitely change your perspective on preparedness. It will change how you look at the world. It will change how you look at preparedness and security planning for emergencies. With that, that's all I got. And I'll take your questions. If you do have any questions, please. Oh, nice. Choice theory. How did you know already? We didn't even get to that. We didn't even get to that slide. How did you know what choice theory is before we even got there? Yeah. Well, if you have it, I hope you read it because it's a fantastic book. All right. Yeah. By the way, next week, I'm going to try to have some cool custom Tac Intel Tuesday tunes here. We'll play it the minute before the show starts. Let everyone jump in here. By the way, if you do have questions, please put Q in the chat before your question so that I can know when I just scroll through here. I can find the questions. Isn't Estonia a Soviet paradise? Well, I think it definitely was a Soviet paradise at one point. Definitely not one now. By the way, of all people of Europe, I'm way more sympathetic to the Baltic states than I am to literally anybody else. All right. Well, I don't see any questions here. Not yet, anyway. Oh, here we go. Mike, we have a list of these books in the comments. Yeah, I'll put them in the video description. I also really need to publish an update to my recommended reading list. And I will, among the many things that I'll work on. Yeah, you can build local authority helping people in town, of course, but you must also run for local office. Well, listen, not everyone is going to be good at politicking. And so I'd much rather find that guy who is pointed in the same direction and maybe he's got a better background or a better pedigree or he's more electable. This is the difference between power and influence. And some people want power. Some people want influence. Some people want neither. So, which I think is, you're just going to be at the power or influence of someone else. There's another great book called The Square and the Tower. Maybe it's The Tower and the Square. It's by Niall Ferguson. Really great book. And then he talks about the difference between power and influence. If you're not a power person, if you don't want to run for elected office, whatever, if you don't like exercising power, you probably should not be a politician. But otherwise, I want to find the guy that's pointing in the same direction and be highly influential with him to make sure that the rules that are being made are beneficial to us. Like, what is the entire purpose of government? It is to make sure that you have one single entity that enforces the law and you have the rule of law, which I'm completely copacetic with, as long as the laws are just. An unjust law is no law at all. And if you are not in a position, if you're not making sure that's happening, then you're reliant on someone else to make sure that's happening. And they're probably not making sure that's happening. And I think that's the position where a great many places are in this country. All right, let's get through this 100 spam comments from this other guy. All right, guys. Well, I don't see any other questions in here. So listen, that does it for Tac Intel Tuesday. Thanks for hanging around. Listen to me talk. I hope our little talk on human today was beneficial for you. as always, think about how this applies to you at the local level, and then go and do these things. Maybe next week, since we didn't talk about questioning techniques, maybe talk about questioning techniques next week. But you've got source motivation. I hope this gives you kind of a bedrock psychological understanding of what needs to happen next. So with that, everyone, thanks so much for your support, and we'll be around next Tuesday. Listen, we're still doing this morning intel briefing on YouTube and X. I think starting next week, we'll probably be here on the Ford Observer YouTube channel with that. And I don't think anything else is going to change for X. So at any rate, everyone, thanks so much. That's going to do it for Tac Intel Tuesday. I'll be back next Tuesday, but I'll see all the early warning folks tomorrow. With that,